The wind howled across the frozen plains of Cryox 7, whipping crystalline snow into spiraling dancers that sparkled under the planet's twin moons. Nikolai Petrov pulled his thermal suit tighter, checking the readouts on his wrist display as he trudged through the knee-deep snow. The terraforming outpost was only supposed to be a 6-month assignment, but 3 weeks in, he was already questioning his decision to volunteer. "Base, this is Petrov," he called into his comm unit. "Found the source of the energy anomaly. Looks like some kind of crystalline formation, but the readings are off the charts." Static crackled in response. "Perfect. The storm must be interfering with communications again." The formation before him pulsed with an inner light, rising from the snow like a cathedral of ice and starlight. As he approached, his sensors began to whine in protest, their readings becoming increasingly erratic. Something about this place defied standard analysis. A sound like breaking glass echoed across the landscape, and Nikolai froze. The crystalline spires were shifting, rearranging themselves like pieces of a puzzle coming to life. As he watched, transfixed, a figure emerged from within the formation, tall, elegant, and absolutely impossible. She stood nearly 15 feet high, her body composed of the same crystalline material as the surrounding structures. Faceted planes caught and reflected moonlight, creating rainbow aureoles around her form. But what caught Nikolai's attention were her eyes, deep pools of swirling azure that held intelligence, curiosity, and unmistakable fear. "You are small," the being spoke, her voice resonating like wind through ice caves. "Are you real?" Nikolai swallowed hard, fighting the urge to retreat. "I'm real enough. Name's Nikolai Petrov, terraform engineer from Earth." "And you are?" "Zyra," she replied, kneeling to examine him more closely. Despite her massive size, her movements were graceful, precise. "I did not know such small creatures could achieve spaceflight." "We're full of surprises," Nikolai managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just like finding a 15-foot-tall crystal person wasn't exactly in my mission briefing." A sound like chimes filled the air, she was laughing. "Your kind does not know of us. We are the Cryoxians. This world has been our home since the stars were young." Her expression shifted, becoming more solemn. "Though perhaps not for much longer." "What do you mean?" Nikolai asked, but before Zyra could answer, his sensors screamed a warning. The storm was intensifying, temperatures dropping rapidly even by Cryox 7 standards. "You must seek shelter," Zyra said, urgency in her crystalline voice. "Your form is too fragile for what approaches." She hesitated, then extended her massive hand. "Come. My sanctuary will protect you." Nikolai looked at her offered hand, then at the worsening storm. His training screamed at him to retreat to base, to report this encounter through proper channels. But something in those swirling azure eyes told him this moment was too important for protocol. "Well," he said, stepping onto her palm, "this definitely beats freezing to death." As Zyra carried him toward the crystal formation, Nikolai couldn't help but notice how she tried to make herself smaller, how she moved with exaggerated care. She was afraid, not of him, but for him. It was a fear he recognized, the same one he'd seen in the eyes of people who thought themselves too different, too dangerous to be close to others. Inside the crystal sanctuary, the howling of the storm became a distant melody. The space was vast, with chambers that seemed to shift and flow like liquid glass. Zyra set him down gently on a raised platform that brought him closer to eye level with her. "Your heart rate is elevated," she observed, concern in her voice. "Are you afraid?" "Honestly?" "A little," Nikolai admitted. "But not of you. This is just a lot to process. Yesterday I thought I was alone on an ice ball, terraforming it for human habitation. Today I'm having a conversation with a crystal giant in a living cathedral. It's not exactly a normal Tuesday." "Normal," Zyra echoed, the word seeming to carry special weight. "I understand this concept. Among my people, I am not normal. Too tall, too much. They say I lack proper restraint, that my size makes me dangerous. She gestured to the sanctuary around them. This is where I come to be alone, where I cannot accidentally harm others. Nikolai felt something twist in his chest. Here was one of the most remarkable beings he'd ever encountered, and she'd been made to feel like a monster because of her size. Being different doesn't make you dangerous, Zyra. Look at how carefully you carried me. You're more gentle than most humans I know. The crystals around them pulsed briefly brighter, and Nikolai realized she was blushing. You are kind, small Nikolai. But you do not know the burden of always having to be careful, of living in fear of a single careless moment. Maybe not, he agreed, sitting down on the platform. But I know what it's like to be the odd one out. Back on Earth, I was always the guy who preferred machines to people, who got more excited about terraform equations than parties. Different isn't wrong, it's just different. Breaking the ice. The storm raged for 3 days. Nikolai spent that time learning about Zyra's world, while she discovered the intricacies of human culture through his stories. He taught her about Earth's many cultures, about the concept of music, and about human determination. In return, she shared the secrets of her crystalline people, their connection to the planet's core, and their ancient traditions. Your communication device has been making that noise for the past hour, Zyra observed, gesturing to Nikolai's comm unit with one graceful finger. The storm had finally begun to subside, allowing some signals to break through. Base trying to find me, Nikolai explained, checking the messages. 3 days of radio silence tends to make people nervous. He looked up at her towering form. They're probably organizing a search party right now. Zyra's crystalline features shifted in what he now recognized as concern. Will they be afraid of me? Will they try to harm my people? Not if I can help it, Nikolai assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. Humans didn't exactly have the best track record when it came to first contact situations. But we need to handle this carefully. My disappearance has already complicated things. As if in response to his words, a distant rumble echoed through the sanctuary. But this wasn't the storm, it was engines. Search vehicles. They're closer than I thought, Nikolai muttered. He turned to Zyra, whose azure eyes had widened in alarm. Listen, I need you to trust me. Let me go out there alone first. Let me explain. They will not understand, Zyra said softly, her voice carrying notes of old pain. They will see only my size, my strangeness. They will assume I am a threat, just as my own people do. Then we'll make them understand, Nikolai insisted. He placed his hand against one of her massive fingers, a gesture that had become natural over the past days. You've shown me nothing but kindness. You saved my life. That's the truth they need to hear. The search vehicles were getting closer. Their lights pierced the swirling snow, creating ghostly patterns on the crystal walls. Zyra knelt down, bringing herself as close to Nikolai's level as she could. My people believe that size determines destiny, she said. That my height makes me unsuitable for delicate tasks, for close relationships. Yet these past days, speaking with you, I have felt normal. Accepted. Size doesn't determine anything except how high you can reach without a ladder, Nikolai replied, earning a chiming laugh from her. It's what's in here that matters. He tapped his chest. And you, Zyra, have the biggest heart I've ever encountered, metaphorically speaking. The vehicles were almost upon them now. Zyra helped Nikolai down from the platform, her movement still carrying that careful grace that defied her massive size. Go, she said. But please, remember your promise. Remember that we are not monsters. I could never forget that, Nikolai assured her. He walked to the sanctuary's entrance, then turned back. Besides, I still need to show you what music is. Can't disappear on you before that. As he stepped out into the swirling snow, Nikolai's mind raced. How could he explain this to his superiors? How could he make them understand that this planet wasn't just an empty ball of ice waiting to be terraformed, but home to an ancient, remarkable species? More importantly, how could he help them see Zyra as he did, not as a giant crystal being to be feared, but as a person whose gentle soul far outweighed her physical size? The first search vehicle crested a nearby ridge, its spotlights finding him. Nikolai raised his arms, waving. Behind him, the crystal sanctuary shimmered, partially cloaked by the falling snow. He could feel Zyra's presence, watching, waiting. Whatever came next would change everything, for both their species. "Base, this is Petrov," he called into his comm. "You're not going to believe what I've found. But before you do anything, I need you to listen. Really listen. Because what I'm about to tell you might just change everything we thought we knew about this planet, and about ourselves." Echoes of acceptance. The debriefing lasted hours. Nikolai sat in the sterile conference room of the terraforming base, explaining everything to Director Ramon and her team. He watched their expressions shift from disbelief to wonder to concern as he described the Cryoxians, their crystal technology, and most importantly, Zyra. "Let me get this straight," Ramon said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Not only is this planet inhabited by sentient crystalline beings, but you've spent 3 days with one of them? In their structure. Sanctuary," Nikolai corrected. "And yes. Zyra saved my life during the storm. She's not just some specimen to study, Director. She's a person, intelligent, kind, and completely misunderstood by her own people. Because of her size," Ramon stated, reviewing the notes. 15 feet tall, you said? That's significantly larger than the others you described. Which is exactly why we need to handle this carefully, Nikolai insisted. She's already dealing with prejudice from her own species. I won't let her face the same from ours. Ramon studied him for a long moment. You care about her, she observed. It wasn't a question. I care about doing what's right, Nikolai replied, meeting her gaze. We came here to terraform a supposedly dead world. Instead, we've discovered an entire civilization. We have a responsibility to handle this properly. After more discussion and countless questions, Ramon made her decision. The terraforming project would be temporarily suspended pending diplomatic contact with the Cryoxians. Nikolai would serve as the primary liaison, given his connection with Zyra. When he finally returned to the sanctuary 2 days later, Zyra was waiting. The crystal walls pulsed with subtle light as he entered, reflecting her anxiety. They've agreed to diplomatic talks, Nikolai announced, watching relief flood her features. But there's more. Your people, they've noticed the increased activity. A delegation is coming. Zyra's form stiffened, the crystals around them dimming. My kind rarely leaves their cities. If they're sending a delegation. She trailed off, her azure eyes clouding. They're coming because of you, aren't they? She nodded, her crystalline form catching the light in fractured patterns. I am not supposed to interact with outsiders. My size makes me unpredictable in their eyes. They fear I will cause an incident. Well, technically you did, Nikolai said with a small smile. You caused me to question everything I thought I knew about this planet. About life itself. He approached closer, looking up at her towering form. And I'm grateful for that. Before Zyra could respond, a resonant tone filled the sanctuary, the crystal equivalent of a warning bell. Through the translucent walls, they could see several figures approaching. The Cryoxian delegation had arrived early. Nikolai, Zyra whispered, her voice trembling despite her size. They will try to separate us. They will say I am too dangerous, too unstable for diplomatic relations. Then they're wrong, he stated firmly. You're the reason there's any chance for diplomacy at all. Without you, I would have died in that storm, and our people might have ended up in conflict. The delegation entered, 5 Cryoxians, each standing around 10 feet tall, their forms more angular and rigid than Zyra's. Their leader, who introduced himself as Elder Vri, spoke first. Zyra, his tone held disapproval. You have violated our most sacred protocols. Revealing yourself to an outsider, harboring him in a sacred sanctuary. She saved my life, Nikolai interrupted, stepping forward. The elder's crystalline eyes narrowed at his audacity. The small one speaks out of turn, another delegate observed. Perhaps this demonstrates the wisdom of our protocols. Zyra's actions could have endangered our entire species. Or maybe they've given both our species a chance at something greater, Nikolai countered. He looked at each delegate in turn. You see her size as a flaw, but I see it as a gift. She's strong enough to protect, gentle enough to care, and brave enough to challenge prejudice, both yours and ours. The sanctuary fell silent. Zyra stood perfectly still, caught between her people's judgment and Nikolai's defense. The crystals around them pulsed with tension, reflecting the emotional weight of the moment. You cannot understand our ways, Elder Vri said finally. Size among our kind determines role, purpose, harmony. Zyra's difference disrupts this harmony. Maybe some harmonies need disrupting, Nikolai suggested. Maybe true progress only happens when we're brave enough to question our assumptions, about ourselves and others. Crystal clear truth. The following weeks brought changes that neither Nikolai nor Zyra could have predicted. The human base expanded to accommodate diplomatic meetings, while the Cryoxians reluctantly agreed to share knowledge about their world. But beneath the surface of cooperation, tension simmered. Nikolai found himself caught in the middle, watching as both sides struggled with their prejudices. The human scientists marveled at Cryoxian technology while keeping their distance from the giants. Meanwhile, the Cryoxian delegates treated humans like fragile toys, speaking over them in diplomatic sessions. But it was Zyra who faced the greatest challenges. Her own people had stationed guards at her sanctuary, claiming it was for mutual protection. In reality, they were monitoring her every interaction with the humans, especially Nikolai. They're going to exile me, Zyra confided one evening, as they sat in her sanctuary. The crystal walls had dimmed to match the twilight outside, casting everything in soft blues and purples. The council believes I've grown too, attached to your kind. To you. Nikolai looked up at her from his usual platform. Over the past weeks, he'd begun to read the subtle changes in her crystalline features, the way her facets caught light differently with each emotion, how her azure eyes swirled faster when she was upset. Are they wrong? He asked softly. About the attachment? Zyra's form shimmered, a sign of emotional turmoil he'd come to recognize. They say my size makes me unstable, that my feelings are as outsized as my form. But when I'm with you, Nikolai, I don't feel unstable. I feel complete. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Director Ramon's voice crackled over his comm unit. Petrov, get back to base immediately. The council has made their decision. The council's proclamation hit like an ice storm. They had deemed the human presence disruptive to planetary harmony and demanded an immediate end to the diplomatic mission. More devastating was their judgment of Zyra. She was to be relocated to the polar regions, far from both human and Cryoxian settlements. This is insane, Nikolai argued in the emergency meeting. You can't just exile her because she dared to think differently, to feel differently. The decision is made, Elder Vri stated coldly. Zyra's size has always made her a danger to our society's balance. Her emotional attachment to a small one proves our concerns were justified. Your society's balance? Nikolai's voice rose with anger. Or your control? You're so afraid of anything different that you'd rather lose one of your most compassionate people than admit your prejudices might be wrong. Director Ramon placed a warning hand on his arm, but Nikolai shrugged it off. And before you start talking about size and harmony again, look at what Zyra's dangerous size has achieved. She saved my life. She opened dialogue between our species. She showed more diplomacy and wisdom than any of you. The chamber fell silent. Even the crystal walls seemed to hold their breath. Then, unexpectedly, one of the younger council members spoke up. Perhaps there is truth in the small one's words. Our traditions speak of harmony, but can true harmony exist without diversity? Without growth? A murmur rippled through the assembled Cryoxians. Elder Vria's form pulsed with barely contained frustration. You would risk our entire society's structure based on the words of an outsider? Based on the actions of one oversized, emotional. One who has shown more courage than all of us combined, the younger member interrupted. I have watched Zyra these past weeks. Her size did not make her dangerous, our fear did. Our prejudice did. Nikolai felt hope stirring, but he knew the battle wasn't over. The council was divided, and divided people often clung harder to their prejudices. He needed them to understand something fundamental about both their species. You know what I see when I look at Zyra? He asked, his voice cutting through the debate. I don't see a giant or a danger or even a Cryoxian. I see someone who taught me that the true measure of a person isn't their size or species, it's their capacity for kindness, for growth, for love. Beyond size and species. The council chamber erupted into chaos after Nikolai's words. Voices rang out, some in support, others in opposition, creating a crystalline cacophony that threatened to shatter the very walls. But through it all, Zyra stood silent, her azure eyes fixed on Nikolai with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade away. Director Ramon seized the moment of confusion to make her own statement. The Earth Terraforming Authority is prepared to recognize Cryox 7 as a sovereign world and establish permanent diplomatic relations, but only if all its people are treated with equal respect, regardless of their size. The younger council member, who had introduced himself as Chorus, stepped forward. Our ancestors spoke of a time when size was not a barrier, when all Cryoxians contributed to the harmony in their own way. Perhaps it is time to remember those teachings. Elder Vria's form pulsed with agitation. You would destroy centuries of tradition based on the words of outsiders and love-struck fools. No, Zyra spoke for the first time, her voice resonating with newfound strength. We would grow beyond traditions that limit us. Look at what has happened since Nikolai arrived. Our people are talking, questioning, thinking in ways they haven't for generations. Is that not the truest form of harmony? She moved to stand beside Nikolai's platform, her massive form casting a protective shadow. You call me oversized, unstable, dangerous. But my size let me save a life. My instability helped bridge two worlds. And the only danger here is the danger of remaining trapped by our fears. A soft chime filled the chamber, the traditional signal for council voting. One by one, the members began to pulse with different colors, blue for acceptance, red for rejection. The lights danced across the crystalline walls, creating a spectacular display of democratic decision-making. When the final vote was tallied, even Elder Vri seemed stunned. By a narrow margin, the council had voted to abolish size-based restrictions and accept the human diplomatic mission. More importantly, they had voted to let Zyra remain as an official liaison between their species. The aftermath brought changes that transformed both societies. The human base expanded into a proper diplomatic compound, with spaces designed to accommodate beings of all sizes. Cryoxian culture began to evolve, rediscovering ancient traditions that celebrated diversity rather than feared it. But the most profound change was more personal. One evening, as the twin moons cast their light over the crystalline landscape, Nikolai and Zyra returned to the sanctuary where their story began. Sometimes I wonder, Zyra mused, her form glowing softly in the moonlight, if I had been normal-sized, would any of this have happened? Nikolai laughed from his customary platform, now adorned with comfortable seating and heating elements. Normal is overrated. Besides, I think we both know the answer to that. She tilted her head, a gesture that had become endearingly familiar. Oh. And what answer is that? That love doesn't care about size, he said simply. It doesn't care about species or traditions or what anyone else thinks is possible. It just is. The crystals around them pulsed with warm colors as Zyra smiled, an expression she had learned from him. The council still thinks this is unprecedented, you know. A human and a cryoxian. Good, Nikolai interrupted with a grin. Let's be unprecedented together. We've already changed their minds about size, might as well show them that love is just as limitless. The sanctuary hummed with resonant energy as Zyra carefully lowered her hand to Nikolai's platform. He stepped onto it without hesitation, a gesture of trust that had become as natural as breathing. As she raised him up to eye level, the crystal walls sparked with rainbow lights, a reflection of their shared joy. Together, Zyra agreed, her azure eyes swirling with happiness. Beyond size, beyond species, beyond everything they said was impossible. Outside, the auroras of Cryox 7 danced across the sky, painting the world in brilliant colors. The human base and Cryoxian city glowed in harmony, two civilizations learning to see past their differences. And in their sanctuary, a giant crystalline being and a small human proved that love truly had no bounds. For in the end, it wasn't about being big or small, human or Cryoxian. It was about having the courage to look past the surface and see the heart within. And in that most important measure, Zyra and Nikolai had discovered something greater than any difference that could divide them. They had found a love that made them both exactly the right size.